This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
The following is a paid program. The content is provided by the advertiser. WPSL, its staff, management, and ownership are not responsible for the content. Investment involves risk. Prior to making any investment, an investor should meet suitability requirements. Past results are not necessarily indicative of future performance. Neither the opinions expressed nor the information provided constitutes a recommendation to purchase or provide investment advice. The material presented is not a substitute for obtaining professional advice from a qualified person or firm. Securities offered through Centaurus Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. And now, the host of the Team Martek Hour, Joe Martek.
Recognize me. Hey, Greg, I recognize you.
I'm glad you did.
That's good. You still can, Joe.
You know, there comes days that you start to wonder if you can or if you can't.
Yeah,
You were in a bag a week or so ago.
Hey, I was knocking on death's door.
You were inches away, yeah. In fact, I was going to call Nancy before the show started, and I said, is Dan showing or is he dead?
Oh, no. She makes sure I'm alive.
340.
You're not getting away that easy.
Hey, listen, I'm telling you what, if it wasn't for her, I probably
wouldn't be.
She did magnificent.
She did the bulldog routine when they came up. So let's wait till the tests come back next week. And she goes, nope, you do it now.
Mm-hmm.
And saved his life. I mean,
pretty much.
You know, there's certain. Look at this thing that's going now. We were talking about just before the show started, the hepatitis A.
Hello.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that
that's
killed.
a little scary.
You know, I'm thinking about. I was gonna go out to dinner tonight at one of the restaurants that lives close to where he's at.
Right.
I think I might not go out tonight. Yeah. Well, you know, they don't.
You think
know.
it's a restaurant?
They don't know,
They don't.
or
Right.
at least they're not divulging. But there's now 16 cases in Martin County.
So you would think all they would have to do is see if they all went to the same restaurant.
No kidding.
Right.
Now, this is when the government gets involved, Greg, you know, they have attorneys. And so you're
They
not
have
supposed to talk for a while?
Well, they're
A gag order.
investigating.
A gag order.
They have said, and there was an article in the paper today, that they don't know. Now,
That's probably,
I know.
That's probably a truthful statement. They probably don't know.
Yeah.
Definitively.
Right.
They probably have some
Definitively.
suspicions.
Uh-huh.
Well, the key is this. I mean, wouldn't we, one of the questions you say, where'd you eat out last at before this
Yeah.
thing hit?
Before you died?
Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah,
too late then.
Well, you would think they'd get credit card statements and be able to piece that together.
Are you using logic again?
I'm using logic.
Anyway.
See if they ate at the same restaurant.
16.
Mhm.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And Martin County is a small county.
Yeah, it is.
When they say
Yeah.
they've got like 5 in Palm Beach County, 1 in Okeechobee County, 2 in, but they always evidently have some hepatitis A running around. But the preponderance all of a sudden to hit
Maybe
Martin
just a
County.
batch of bad lettuce again.
Well, it
Or
could be.
pickers.
It could
Could
be.
be.
Yeah, the harvesters.
Well, they say it's transmitted from a person who's infected by feces.
Yeah.
And now that
So lots of hand washing, people.
But that's not usually on my diet.
But you don't know. Yeah. You know. But it still may be in the kitchen.
all I know is it's
Keep your fingernails clean. Is that what you're telling me?
Keep them clean.
Anyway, this is
Keep
the
'em cut
Team
short.
Team
And maybe
Martek
not eat
Hour.
out.
I am Joe Martek, and sitting next to me is Dan Warren, and sitting next to him is Greg Fasula. And would you believe it or not, these are the original 3 members that started doing these radio shows back in 2004. And here it is 15 years later, and none of us have died yet, even though we've tried, Dan, to get close to it, right?
Hey, it wasn't my fault. It was.
I know.
It was one of those things.
Dan-
If we have more time, I could be more specific. But I did talk to my lawyer and I did talk to my accountant, and we're in the process of starting this nonprofit coalition between prostate awareness and sepsis and stuff, because that's really
You say, is it going to
the
be a
tale of my
foundation? Or?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
the tale of my woe, basically what started all this. And I don't consider myself the smartest guy in town, and I knew a little bit about
Well,
sepsis.
I knew that part.
Yes, I know you did. But I didn't know that sepsis was the #1 cause of death in hospitals.
In hospital.
I didn't know that over 1 million
Yeah, well, that's
people.
where you're getting it.
Well, yeah, over 1 million
Right.
people a year get it, and of those 1,300,000 plus die, and the ones that survive have organ problems or
Yeah.
other things. So it's like, hey, there needs to be a little bit more awareness out there when we have a disease of this magnitude. That by the time you figure out you got it, it's probably too late.
So what you're saying is if you get it, you wish it killed you because the complications could be really bad.
What I'd like to be able to say is if you have certain procedures that may bring bacteria into your system, you need to be very aware of small, minute changes in the way you feel or the way you behave, because these are the precursors of getting it. And if you did what I did, which is go home and tell my wife, hey, I don't feel good, I'm getting my robe and jumping into bed.
And she said, no, you're getting in the
said,
car.
No, you're
we're
getting
going
in the car. We're going to the hospital, because she knew more about it than I do. But if I had
Did
gotten,
Nancy know about sepsis?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
well,
She called the doctor and they confirmed, but there needs to be more awareness, especially
because if she hadn't known that,
I don't know.
Well,
I'm going to say I probably wouldn't be here.
yeah.
It's like we were talking about that couple in Stewart that died of the hepatitis. They thought they had the flu.
Thought they had the flu.
Well, that's what honestly, when
thought you had the
when
flu?
I first started shivering and shaking, I go,
Yeah.
oh, I think I'm getting the flu.
Yeah.
I'm sick. I better go home. Well, I should have been smarter than that. Knowing that I had just had this procedure,
Right.
I should have put 2 and 2 together, but I
Right.
wasn't smart enough.
Well, nobody wants
most
to
people
run.
don't.
Nobody wants to run to the
Well,
hospital.
think about all of the
Right.
symptoms: malaria, mosquito-borne illnesses. There's 2 or 3 different ones we can get where the symptoms start off with, shakes and cold and fever and stuff. And how many things start off with those symptoms?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing,
But if you,
Dan.
what I want people to know is if you've had certain procedures that might bring this into your system, and then you start exhibiting these characteristics, don't try to figure it out. Go and let the doctor figure it out.
Well,
But you
any
don't-
type of surgery.
And you don't think that type of procedure would put you at that risk either.
Oh, I wasn't smart enough to figure that out. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Listen.
Any type of invasive
Joe and
surgery.
I have some friends that are single. They're about our age. They would have done what I did, but they wouldn't be here.
No.
Because they didn't have that background that my wife has. Plus, my son's mother-in-law is an orthopedic surgeon. His sister-in-law is a pediatric oncologist. They're all calling, trying to tell Nancy their input and trying to encourage her to get an infectious disease specialist in there right away, which she did. She accomplished that. So not everybody has that backup system. So I was fortunate. I was blessed to have
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I want to verify something with Greg. How many times in your practice have people had a legal issue and they say, oh, we don't want to spend that few dollars to talk
What
to
do you mean,
the
how many
attorney,
times? How about
and
100%?
and then they come to you and it's a big major deal.
Right. I mean, they come to me, or it's too late to come
It's
to me.
too late,
And
yeah.
a lot of times that's the case. Who comes to me, say if wills were done or deeds were done and they weren't done correctly. That happens quite often.
It always reminded me, and you guys may remember, there was an old STP commercial.
Yeah,
And the guy
yeah.
would hold up the little STP can and he'd say, you can pay me now,
Or pay me
or
later.
you can pay me later when I,
I thought
rebuild
that
your
was
engine.
Fram.
Yeah.
That was STP.
SDP.
STP.
You know what? It kind of reminds me, Greg, you're bringing up a story, but let me just interlude here for 1 second. We had another voice that just came in, which is our guest member, Alan Love, retired prosecuting attorney from Wisconsin, who is not an official member, but my God, you might as well be. You're
He
the
keeps
only
us
one.
on track
He
when we
shows
get
up.
off on
Having
tangents.
2 attorneys in the same room is a scary thing. But hey, what can we
I
do?
got my hand in my wallet.
I
right
know,
now.
man, both of us. What was that old question when a person says, are you a friend of mine? Hang on to your wallet real quick. Back in 2004, Dan Warren, independent insurance agent, big word, independent. Greg Fasula, attorney, and Joe Martek, financial advisor, started doing radio shows with the simple concept of answering questions for people. That each person had an area of expertise, the other one did not. And then over a period of time, we added Ms. Victoria Lloyd, Remax of Stewart, undoubtedly the hardest working person alive, definitely the hardest working realtor alive, who, when she came in, we were in the middle of our real estate debacle when everything was collapsing here, and new words came up, and what she did for people is scary good. That the woman is like a bulldog. When she gets a hold, she just makes things happen. Which brings us to Mike Paulus, mortgage broker, who works hand in glove with Victoria, and basically cart and horse or try to get people pre-qualified before they go look for a home, so that they know what they can afford and what the payments are going to be.
Well, Joe, we've always talked about the fact that if you're a bona fide buyer and it's your time and you're going to be looking, wouldn't it be nice to know what you can qualify for before you go out and look? Because you don't want to look at some gorgeous mansion that you can't get into, and now you're going to be disappointed with everything else. Know what you can buy and live within your means.
I'm down to looking single wide trailers.
You're back to looking at that pup tent.
Greg has kind of reminded me. I have a buddy of mine. His father died recently, and as typical with when I say a buddy, just a fellow that I know, and people advised him.
The neighbor?
One. And so he goes to an attorney who was advised by a brokerage firm, and immediately he takes a $30,000 bank account and puts it through probate, and suggests that other things go through probate that did not have to go through probate. And I sat with this attorney and said, "Wait a minute. The administration is 2 or 3 weeks." He goes, "Not necessarily." I said, "Well, the probate is probably 6 months." He said, "Maybe." Sound like an attorney, Greg?
Sounds like an attorney.
And I said,
Could
"Why
true.
in the world would you go through?"
It could be true. It might not be
could
true.
be true.
It depends on the type of probate.
Depends. Everything is, it's wearables, and sometimes they make them sexy. Now I hear it depends.
It depends.
Yeah, right. So anyway, when we all got done, this guy, I loved it. He looks at my buddy who's sitting over there, and he says, "Okay, Martek's sitting there. He may know about financing and financial terms, but he doesn't know anything about the law. So listen to me." Well, that went over well. So then when I took him to Greg says, "Hey, they've already started the probate process. Now it's a double-edged sword. You got to get them out of that and into this. It's going to take it'd be worse than just going through the probate."
Right.
But
because they were at a process already where it would be hard to back up.
Yeah.
He's going to charge him for the time.
Oh,
he's
hey,
doing that.
He was saying, "Hey, listen, you're paying me $400 an hour. You're taking up an hour of my time now, so quit complaining."
Could you sue that attorney for malpractice or something? I mean,
well, yeah, but you understand, you can do all these things, but understand what's your collectible.
Right.
$5,000. You might spend $20,000 in attorney's fees to make $5,000.
All right.
And malpractice really has to be something that something that they really did wrong.
It's not
a matter of
just
opinion.
bad.
So this was just like
it can't just be like bad
his
advice.
opinion in a way for him to make more money, probably.
Well, his advice was the best advice he knew to give. It wasn't illegal
for
advice.
himself.
No.
It wasn't illegal advice.
Okay. Okay.
340-1590, 340-1590. I mean, it's a constant thing that we go through, especially us three and everybody in the group, when people, and what Alan was just saying, people say, "Hey, can I go to Office Depot?" And sure you can. That may not be a legal document in the state of Florida, but you've got something
better than nothing.
that may be better than nothing. But then
Not
when it goes into the court system, you might end up spending 10 times as much in the court system than you would have if you'd have done it right the first time.
Right.
And if you do it wrong, you're definitely going to spend more because now it's all kinds of problems.
And a lot of times it's not them that spends; it's the heirs or relatives that do the spending.
Well, listen, that's where attorneys are happy. When they say the word probate, when I do this to Greg, he starts smiling and rubbing his hands together immediately because this is where attorneys can make bucks.
But if the people listening understand that the goal here isn't to sell them a product.
No.
The goal is to find a way for them to do it properly with the best value. Anybody can spend money, but if you do it right, you spend less.
And the best outcome.
Absolutely.
In the long
I
run.
regularly, it seems like almost weekly, somebody says, they call up and say, "Hey, my attorney Joe wants me to put all this stuff in the trust." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I don't know. They just said we should do it, so I should do it." I said, "Well, let's just take a look at what you've got. All right, you've got annuity contracts. They're not subject to probate. They don't go into trust. You've got a retirement account. That's not subject to probate. That doesn't need to go in the trust. Your house is also your homestead. Technically is not subject to probate. You may put it in the trust if you have one already, but the bottom line, that's not. If you have a bank account and you have TOD on it, transfer on death, that's not subject to probate. If you have a brokerage account and you put TOD on it, that's not subject to probate. What do you have? And this client of mine says, well, I guess I don't have anything.
But Joe, do you think that an attorney might make that suggestion because it's broad in scope and it's simple and I put everything in there and I'm done?
I think that was a nice way of explaining how to get a fee.
Well, yeah. He's going to have, listen, that's what he does for a living. He wants to get paid. So
what I look
I'm
at
going to tell you to put it all in there, and I know I haven't missed anything, and we're good to go. Here's my bill.
And that makes it simple. And, you know, Greg, it does. And that does happen regularly. You and I both know that.
What do you mean by making it simple?
They put it all in there.
Just so that the heirs, it's simpler for the heirs?
What happens is you've got a trust, so here we need to fund the trust. So what we do is take every asset you've got and put them in the trust, whether they need to be or not.
Mm-hmm.
That way I know I covered all my bases.
Right? Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong.
Not necessarily it's the cheapest thing, we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do that, but I mean the trustee's still going to have the same. The trustee's going to still have the same procedures as far as liquidating those assets as the heirs would go through.
So and I've had clients come in to see me and say, "Mom died, and Joe, they want me to do this." And I said, "Well, come on in, I'll do it all for you because what your mom has is not subject to probate. So we just have to fill out death claims."
Here's what I would say, Joe. It's not bad advice. It's just not the best advice.
There you go. Way to go, Dan boy.
There you go.
And what I try to do
now that he's healthy again, he's on his game.
What I try to do is give options.
I
just let them know that this is what would happen in this situation, and this was what would happen in another, and let them decide.
Well, the key thing that and I've seen you do it, you say, hey, look, and based on what you've said, you really don't need a trust. A will suffice and do the same thing and cost you less money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, and one of the reasons we all got together way back when I was first meeting different attorneys was finding that some of the guys were not quite user-friendly. When I'm saying user-friendly, they were making a real long dollar. And
not good for your checking
Not necessarily good for the client. So to me, what we want to do here is make sure that anybody we talk to, we're doing the right thing for them, we're putting them in the right direction. We talk regularly between us and the group about how to help people. In fact, we were talking about one earlier that sister has a sister in nursing home who wants to get out of the nursing home, who wants to live at home but doesn't have money.
I'm confused already.
Well, it becomes complicated, you know. So
it does. It can be.
And it does happen. So 340-1590, 340-1590.
Now, Greg, a few minutes ago you were saying you discuss it, put out the options, and let them sort of make up their decision.
Right.
Now, I can tell you that I sort of do it that way, but there are certain things that I personally feel are important.
Yeah.
And those are things that I try to push a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the session, they're the ones who write out the check and they make the purchase.
Right.
But if there are certain things that I feel are just so important, a lot of times I'll say, well, you know, we did discuss this, and I know you don't want it, but here's just a little form I want you to sign that says we did discuss it. So when something bad happens to you, you can't come back and say, well, I don't remember you saying that. Mm-hmm. Well, I can say, well, here's where you signed it.
No, sometimes you do, but you know, if it looks like, you know, one choice is really the way that I would suggest, then I would suggest that. But otherwise, sometimes it just comes down to what their preference is.
I mean, I don't want to be insulting and say, well, you're an idiot not to buy this. I can't say that.
Well, I had a client.
But I can do it in a loving way and say, well, I understand that's not what you want, but, you know, as someone who you've hired to give you some advice, just sign off here that says, well, at least we discussed it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dan, as an example, there are so many people in Florida that don't have auto insurance. Would you suggest that one of those things that you'd lovingly suggest would be uninsured motorists?
Well, if they have car insurance in the state of Florida, because of the large number of under and uninsured drivers, I would definitely say if you don't have it, you ought to get it. In fact, the state of Florida is so adamant about it that if you don't sign a form that says you don't want it, you automatically get it.
Yeah.
They automatically give it to you. Now, what I would also say is the state of Florida has failed in its obligation to the citizens to make sure that people who are driving on the highways are properly insured. Driving on the roads is a privilege, it's not a right. So you shouldn't be out and about driving your car not insured properly where you could hurt or injure someone. But the state has done such a poor job that now when you buy uninsured motorist, when you go home, look at the cost of uninsured motorist, which basically protects you against me, and compare it to the bodily injury property damage that protects me from you. You're almost like buying two policies. It's so expensive, and it should not be, and it used to not be. Mm-hmm. And I believe that what people should do is complain to their state representatives and say, hey, can't you find a better way to make sure that people have insurance? In other states, they have the ability to do that. Yeah. If you don't have insurance, they boot your car or pull your license.
Don't they revoke the tag?
Yeah,
Listen,
sometimes they've gone and taken them off.
After the fact, the damage is done.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the insurance companies, they lobby the
many
politicians, and they're so powerful that
you might remember many years ago, the state of Florida set a program up where they had a state trooper come out and get your tag if you didn't have the right insurance. Mm-hmm. And so many people complained that said, oh, I have insurance, I have proof, don't take my tag, that instead of refining the system, they said, we're not smart enough. They didn't really say those words, but that's what they basically said was, our computers aren't intelligent enough to figure this out. We're abandoning the program. You are on your own. Yeah. And that's not how it should be. So now what they say to you is, oh, you had a wreck or a major violation and you didn't have insurance? Mm-hmm. We don't trust you anymore. We did trust you. Now you got to file an SR-22, which says you have to have insurance. Then if you let your insurance drop, to reinstate it, when they pull your license, they give you a little fine. But in the meantime, you can do all kinds of damage.
But
so it doesn't stop the damage.
Why isn't liability? Why isn't that required?
Well, years ago, when I first started driving, you had to have minimum of $10,000 per person, $20,000 per person bodily injury. Mm-hmm. The state financial responsibility laws still require that. But to get your tag, they don't make you prove it. They only make you have the PIP and the property damage. Yeah. What they say, in essence, is, Greg, we know you're a straight-up guy. Mm-hmm. We're trusting you to buy this. And then after the damage is done, they go, Greg, we're so surprised. We trusted you and you let us down. Now you must do the SR-22. But you've already done damage.
I recently had a client, well, not a client, a potential client come in, and he was riding a bicycle, and he was hit, and he got banged up pretty bad, broken arm, broken shoulder, no liability insurance on the driver.
Right.
But he had his PIP should have covered him.
He had PIP, but he had no UM. So that's he's
listen, when the old saying, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing when I look at somebody. I'm supposed to say, hey, what's your goal? What do you want to accomplish? Before you recommend anything, what's our goal here? How do we get there? And normally we want to get there the most cost-efficient way, which means cheapest.
Well, don't forget, Joe, you have a lot of young people and a lot of elderly who live on a very tight budget.
Sure.
If you're husband and wife with a child or two, insurance is a major blow to you if you're under a certain age. And for me to walk in and say, hey, it's $800 without the uninsured motorist and $1,500 with it, you go, well, where do I sign to not take it?
Yeah.
Even though I discuss it, you have to live and you have to eat, and I understand all that.
When I ask people, do you have uninsured motorists? And they say, well, I have full coverage. And then I look at their declarations.
Yeah.
And there's
no such thing really as full coverage.
What is full coverage?
Yeah.
Well, the reality is everything that we do individually, we know. But I can't tell you how many times a client will say to me, Joe, tell me what you told me 6 months ago that I forgot. And it happens. So when you sit with people and you advise them, Dan, the best you can, and then when it's done, they walk out the door and they're thinking about having dinner or who knows what, it rips right through.
Well, I always thought that people who say I have full coverage, I think they're thinking I've got comp and collision and a little bit of bodily injury and stuff, not knowing there's all kinds of little pitfalls and things you can get into. Give you a good example. All the time I had clients who say, hey, Dan, when I go and rent my car from a rent-a-car place, doesn't my comp and collision carry on over to that car I just rented? And the answer is yes, but here's the caveat. Your deductible is still applicable, so if you have a $500 deductible, they're going to hit you for that. Oh, and by the way, if that rental car is in the shop for like 2 weeks while they're fixing it, they're going to charge you for the fact that they couldn't rent it, and your insurance does not cover that. All right, so be aware that, yes, you do have some coverage, but you could still be made to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
What about the insurance? Let's say
that.
you didn't crash it, someone crashed into you. What about the insurance of that person?
The car rental company is going to still look to you for your contract to pay that. There may be some subrogation up the road where the other insurance carrier that smashed into you
Pays back to your
picks
insurance
that up.
company.
That's a big maybe.
But it's a big maybe.
No,
be a
and you're
long-
way down the road too.
long time, yeah.
So here's what I do. I'm not telling you this is what you should do.
Don't rent a car.
Well, no.
Rent it in somebody
When I
else's
go
name.
to a place that I know where I'm going, I always view it's just like being at home. But if I go to a place where I'm a tourist, and we all know how tourists drive around here, that's how I drive up there. I always take the insurance from the insurance company.
Really?
Always.
Well,
See, I never thought about that you might be charged
Well, see,
for that
that's
car
why we're
being out
talking
of
about it,
service.
because 99% of the people don't know that that's
Yeah.
one of
I
those things.
have insurance. What,
Well, now
why
you
should I
learn.
get
Greg,
more?
see what you learned. Now, Dan, can you add that to a person's existing policy?
No.
Okay, so much for that.
No.
So buy the insurance when you rent the car.
But now there are some credit card companies, and I can't tell you, I think, like American Express and other ones that may have some little bells and whistles. I don't know if they
Yeah,
do.
some do.
But you might be able to contact them and say, hey, I'm going to wherever, and I'm going to rent a car. Tell me about how your credit card protects me if I rent it with your credit card.
There you go.
Some of them do offer
Yeah,
some
yeah.
stuff.
340-1590, 340-1590. So, back in '04, Greg Fasula, attorney, Dan Warren, independent insurance agent, Joe Martek, financial advisor, started doing the shows. Again, added Ms. Victoria Lloyd, Remax of Stewart, hardest working realtor ever born, back in around '09, I'm
You
guessing.
know, Joe, last week we didn't talk at all about money till like the last 2 minutes.
Did we talk about money?
We might have. Maybe your compliance officer had to listen to the very end.
These poor guys that have to listen to these shows, and I don't talk anything at all about what we do. It can be.
Well, they might learn about insurance.
I tell you, this
Or
one
politics.
guy, one of my compliance officers died, and I think he died
Did
on
he die
purpose, so he
listening-
didn't have to
listening to
listen
your
to any
show?
more shows.
He died on purpose. I like that.
On purpose.
Yeah, because it's a sitting a whole hour and listening to a show that had nothing to do with about securities.
Now,
and
you think that's
investments.
all he does all day is listen to
No,
people?
no, because they're given, each one is given a territory with X number of reps. And let's just say one compliance officer might have 100 or 50 or 200 reps in his territory.
But other than what we do, what would they look for? Like maybe advertising or something?
Well, what happens is, yes, guys like me, we can't run an ad unless we get it pre-approved. So you got to send the ad in if you're going to run it and get it pre-approved. Like the radio show, we've got to have the disclaimer at the beginning and at the end on the
that we
radio
know
show.
nothing.
That we know nothing.
And Dan, Joe doesn't have you have a commercial that runs
Right.
outside the show.
But he doesn't
Joe's
have-
not running one.
No,
Because
I know.
If I ran the commercial, my intro and my exit would be the whole
Be the
commercial.
whole commercial.
Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense to do it. And I tell this to people all the time. When they're watching TV, and Dan, it just frosts me to no end. The guys that I know that are, quote, selling index annuities, that's what they're selling, and they come on and they show all this great big beautiful room full of people, and then they have testimonials. People are getting this and getting that. But there's no such thing as a broker-dealer on a securities because those ads would never be approved by compliance officers.
See, in some of them on TV, it's a little bit different because their disclaimer can be in teeny tiny
Oh, they
little
are.
print at the very bottom of the picture.
Well, what it does, the one in particular that I've seen, finally has come up and said, we do not deal in securities, which is good. But he's not saying he's selling index annuities either. And I get this thing constantly. In fact, I had a client yesterday.
So are you saying it's not what he said, Joe? It's what he
didn't
didn't say.
Well, you know, we carry errors and omissions insurance, which I've said, I've done this with many, many, many clients. We called up the company directly to find out what they had. They didn't know what they had, and they were not told the whole truth. But that's called an error of omission, because the guy didn't lie to them. He just didn't tell them the whole story. So very often when I see these things, I'll tell the client, okay, we're going to call the company up. We're going to ask questions. I'm going to write down the questions ahead of time. You're going to give them authority to talk to me. We'll have them on speakerphone. And when we're all done, you're going to throw up, because what you think you have, you don't have.
You don't have. Mm-hmm.
And then every time I hear these commercials on TV, they're not lying. The guys will come up and say, I was credited 5 or 6 or 7%, not paid, credited. Nobody has ever said one time, can I take my interest out? Well, under most circumstances, the answer is no.
Well, now let me go back. Under most circumstances, I would say it'd be yes, but a big penalty.
You can't take your interest out. You can take money out,
You can't take anything out.
but you can't. Well, here's what happens.
You can take your own money
So
back.
it's a credit, but it's not real money.
Well,
Yet.
I love that.
Credited
analogy.
means it's
not real money.
It's
It's not real
added
money.
into your account, but you can't have it.
Okay.
How do I get it? Well,
Can I give my wife some of that? It's not real money
No.
for her to go spend.
so it's a
See
very
how that
difficult
works.
thing to understand. Now, I had a fellow that I went to see, he said, Joe, they're paying me 7% interest. And I said, really? Show me that. So he brings it out, and it says 7% factor. And I says, what's that mean to you? He goes, it's not interest, is it?
Factor.
And I said, no. What they do is you put in $100,000, and if you're 75 years old, they're going to give you $7,000 a year till you're broke. When the money's gone, they're going to give you your money back. You said, what happens when it runs out? Well, it depends on the company. Some will keep paying you, but some don't.
It's almost like putting your own money in a situation where you get an allowance.
Well, it's like buying an annuity with your own money. You know, you're buying like you say, an allowance or a pension. It's much like you funding your own
The
pension.
key thing is, and it's hard for the consumer. So I had this lady the other day. She called up. She goes, well, Joe, you talk about these indexes as they're bad things. I said, well, here's the thing. You can be invested in the Standard & Poor's 500. You can get it through anybody. You can either get it inside of an annuity contract, or you can get it through a brokerage firm. The key thing is this. That's a way to invest. And what was it, Alan, 2 years ago? The S&P 500 was pretty close to 20%.
That's
so
correct.
if you were
That's
invested in with any broker dealer in an index fund called the S&P 500, and it was a legitimate, not inside of an index annuity, if it went up 20, you got 20. Right?
That's correct.
And you could cash
Yes.
it in and run with it.
Yes.
Yeah. Just that simple.
Yeah.
But if it's inside of a, quote, index annuity, you got all kinds of wrinkles that may not allow
There's
you
probably
to
a
do that.
cap on that.
Well, the cap is another big word. The biggest problem I have is trying to explain people what to look for before they make this decision. And what I often say is, when you get instructed by somebody on what to do, before you do it, call me and run it through me, and I will show you what you should ask.
Would you at this time like to turn the mic over to Mike?
Why don't I turn the mic over to Mike?
How about that?
Hey, Mike, it's Joe Martek. You're on the radio.
Hi. It's great when you all talk insurance. It's something I can always learn from. I know so little about it, and it's so applicable. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hey,
You
Dan,
know-
Dan, boy, way to go.
Hey, listen, insurance is one of the few things that we spend so much money on that we pray we never use.
Isn't that the truth?
Yes. I'm calling with a simple money question today. I'm wondering, can America flourish with a peasant majority? I think that's what's coming. I never hear you all talk about that. Could you do that?
Are you talking about the majority of Americans flourish, or just a few? If you're
Well,
talking
the
about
effort-
just a few, then the answer would be yes.
I wonder, because, I mean, I think it's going to be a big, big number the way things are looking, the way things are going with, you know, all the changes that are happening. So I just wondered if you wanted to talk about that, how it would work.
Well, you know, Mike, I can tell you from my family's background, which was, you know, my father and grandmother came over here to this country from Russia. Her dad was the last minister of agriculture for the Tsar, and I can trace that family back to the 1400s. And in fact, the last time I went to Russia, there's money with my family's picture on it. So when I tell you they were an affluent family, they were an affluent family. But because of the fact that the Tsar and his minions didn't give to the people, at some point in time, they
Got a
They
little
revolted.
Bolshevik revolution.
Yes. Now, here's what my grandma told me. She goes, we had serfs who worked for us. They weren't slaves. They were free people. The Tsar had freed them. And we would take the money we made off our crops. We would buy the necessary seed for the next season. And we would give our serfs 40% of the balance of what we had. She goes, now, when your government takes more than that from you, you're worse off than our serfs.
Well, I'm such a slow driver. Occasionally I get stopped because someone will call and say, "Yeah, there's someone in front of me. I think they're drunk." All these people that think US 1 is their own personal racetrack. And it's always most friendly with a deputy. It's usually a good county deputy. And but one of the second question they ask, do you have insurance? So it seems to be a kind of an important thing to them, and I am insured.
Well, they're required to ask you for your proof of insurance and your driver's license and your registration.
I like when they go, do you have a driver's license? And they say no.
No.
Oh, I watch live PD. I think half the drivers out there are under-equipped or have nothing. It's amazing to me.
Well, you remember just a few minutes ago, Mike, we were talking about the uninsured motorist cost. That used to be pretty reasonable.
Uninsured and unlicensed.
Well, we don't have that yet.
Unlicensed.
Makes you wonder.
Well, listen, as we all wonder, and we always have and always will, about what is going on and what can go on, but back again, Mike, in spite of all of the aggravations, thank you, Lord, we're in Florida, 1, in the United States, 2. In spite of our aggravation and what's going on politically, hey, we're in the right place.
Amen. I agree completely on that.
Well, Mike, would you suspect that the reason we have so many people who don't have licenses is because when they do get apprehended and they do get caught, the penalty is so minor that they go, no big deal. But if on the other hand, all their friends who are in the same position go, oh, don't do that. My friend so-and-so got caught doing that. He did 6 months in jail for doing that. You might have a different position, but I think what happens is the penalty is small, and unless they go directly to jail, which they don't, they're not showing up anyway.
See, and a judge could go get your paperwork in order and come before me on this date. Well, instead of getting your paperwork in order, you don't come back, and now there's a warrant out for you. But did you give your real name in the beginning?
No. You're in Texas now or some other place in the Carolinas.
Yeah. Hey,
when I ran the labor hall, I heard one guy say, it's hard going through life not knowing where your next beer is coming from. I never forget that.
Was that the Moose? I used to manage the Moose up north. That sounded like one of our guys.
Moose Lodge?
Yeah. Hey, Mike, listen, my man, thanks for calling in. We love you.
Okay, thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
I got to give a shout out to the University of Alabama.
Because
we won our first national title of the year already.
Yeah?
And it's not even football season.
Scary.
Yeah.
Hey, what'd they win?
The law school. We won the National Moot Court Championship, beating 150 law schools.
Boy, there's a lot of publicity about that.
Yeah, but
that's the first time I've ever heard of it.
Well, it's the first time Alabama has ever won it.
But I guess the only place they published that was in Alabama, huh?
No. Hey, listen.
Well, your son gets it in the law review, right?
Hey, my son used to be in mock trial, and they competed and stuff. If you are a prospective law school student, you look into that. That's important.
Especially if you want to do court work.
Well, we always knew. I know that University of Alabama has a great law school. A lot of people don't realize that, but I know they really have a great law school.
Right.
So,
right.
That's pretty impressive.
It's really impressive.
Was Bear Bryant the coach?
Beat 150 law schools. No, I
the
don't
incentive.
The spirit of Bear Bryant.
Right. 340-1590, 340-1590.
We're going to win another one later in the year.
Well, hey,
you usually
Alabama
end up with a couple.
They have been a contender forever. When you think about a state that most people wouldn't even count, and let alone having a magnificent monster university that is a powerhouse in many different areas.
Well, now let me go back a little bit.
Kind of reminds me
of the first time I went to
Florida.
Tuscaloosa. All right, now just like what you said, Joe, I was expecting this really big place and a big giant. Tuscaloosa's little. There's not much in Tuscaloosa. In fact, When we left Tuscaloosa, we went up there to visit some people. There was this nice pregnant lady who was at the airport who took our tickets. Then we saw her carrying the luggage out. Then we saw her with the earphones on, taking the chucks out from the tires, and with the flashlights directing the plane out.
Did she fly the plane?
No, she didn't fly the plane. No.
Now, you as someone who lived in Tuscaloosa, I'm sure will attest it's a small little town.
It is.
I mean, the one place that I really loved was this barbecue place we went to. There had so many great little barbecue places, so,
It is, but it's grown quite a bit. The last time I went there, I was really surprised.
What, it went from 5,000 to 5,004?
Hey, when school's in session, 50,000 people.
Yeah.
Well, that's why they have a great college, because they don't have anything else.
Well, you know what?
Well, hey, look at Ann Arbor, Michigan. If it wasn't for the University of Michigan, it wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
and you know why
small
Tuscaloosa?
town.
And I'm not pushing Tuscaloosa, but my son-in-law Jim would be proud of me. They do so well continuously year after year that they're able to draft some of the best athletes in the country because they're able to show this is what we've accomplished, routinely. Maybe you ought to think about coming with our program.
340-1590, 340-1590. Bulldog, you haven't called in yet. We haven't see how you doing, my man.
You got biopsy.
Well, if he can't talk, which is
he'll give you some sign language on
right. Well, as we listen, a little thing. I went and saw a movie last week that I think every parent should take their children to when they hit adolescence, and it was called Unplanned. Have you heard of it?
I have heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Let me just tell you something. It was an expose on Planned Parenthood, and I don't know how else to phrase it. And it's a true story, and the lady that wrote the book, who then the movie was based on, actually testified before Congress. And I will tell you, it's horrific. They gave it an R rating. There wasn't a bad word, there wasn't a nasty thing, there was no sex, but it was horrific because showing what abortion does. And when we walked out of there, and I was with ex-girlfriend, she had a 13-year-old granddaughter.
Now, wait a second. You just went and saw this movie, but you were with your ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
No one else go? Well,
nobody else. Nobody. She didn't have a date, neither did I.
So okay.
We went
Okay.
And she didn't have to buy this one. Anyway, it was called. She has a 13-year-old granddaughter, and she says she has got to go see this movie. Has to, because. Dan, everybody here, we're pro-life. That's the easy part. But when you see how horrific the abortion system is, because it showed in graphic detail a fetus being extracted from the womb, and I tell you, it just puts chills and it makes you sick to your stomach. But I just think children, especially grandparents that are listening to this, or parents that are listening to this, when you get a 12, 13, 14-year-old that is just starting into this part of their life, this is a horrific thing that they pretty much need to see to understand what life can or cannot be all about. 340-1590, 340-1590. Bulldog, how you doing, my man? You're on the radio.
Hey, Joe, I'm not taking my grandkids to see that movie anytime soon. I don't want any part of that, and we're just gonna kind of steer around that one for right now.
I didn't say you should take your grandkids, but I think the parents should take when they get puberty age. That was my point.
Yeah, very possible, son.
Anyway, otherwise, how you doing?
Talking still.
Well, that's not really necessarily good, but we accept that. It makes you feel better.
Hey. It could be me, or it could be Mary Beth.
Well, listen, I vote for Mary Beth. I hate to tell you, that was easy. Now, what else?
Oh no, she will chew you up after she talks to you about her latest monthly statement. So don't go there, Joe.
You know what gets me is everybody wants their money to go up every month, and for some reason the market doesn't go up every month. But the quarterly. Since the end of the quarter, December 31st, her account is up around 14% since December 31st. Just a little minor thing.
Yeah, we just had a really rough time at the end of 2018. Though.
Yeah, Yeah, December.
That took a big bite out of it, and I understand it, and I know the bounce back is coming and everything.
No, it's already come. It's already back.
Well, I know, and it'll be here for a bit, even with the tariffs and everything.
You just don't want it to be a dead cat bounce.
That's it, no dead cat bounce. But the other side of the thing, Terry, Mary Beth, too, and you, that if she dies, you're in good shape.
Well, if I die, she's in good shape too. So
I know. That's what I'm
way.
saying. Either way, and her kids, in case you both get run over by a truck. Listen, that's okay.
Yeah. Well, anyway, because Greg did us a nice job and everything. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Bulldog.
Yeah, no problem. Love your business and the power of attorney. I can't stress enough. With the healthcare provider or whatever it is.
Healthcare surrogate, right?
The surrogate.
Right, surrogate.
Yeah.
You really need to do that because a lot of decisions can be made, especially like in an auto accident. You're hurt, she's not, or
vice versa.
Yeah.
Or you both hurt at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that...
yeah.
I got to ask Greg then a question. Is there a healthcare surrogate alternate on that?
There should be, Bulldog. I'm pretty sure there is.
I think Greg always puts himself down as that.
No, I think that's Mary Beth's daughter, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good because sometimes that's needed.
Well, that's what he just said. If you're both in it, then normally.
Yeah, no, it's a great thing to have, Bulldog. I mean, if you don't have that, then you're in trouble.
Hey,
well, the other thing is they make decisions for you that
exactly.
Yeah, you may not agree with or whatever, and there's no one there to speak for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of which, how's the tongue?
My speech is still really lousy. I got another biopsy. They're going to go drill for oil or something. They're going to a journey to the center of the earth. They're
lucky
doing
you.
Whole Orson Welles or something. I mean, but yeah, they're going to go and figure out what it is, and it's probably radiation chemo.
Lucky you, right? Hey. But hey, listen, you sound okay. Not really good, but you sound okay.
Hey, I'm upbeat. What can I do about it? I just beat it down.
That's right, my man. Hey,
Oh, by the way, Alan's there, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yes,
Hi,
I
Alan.
am, Bulldog.
Love you, man.
We're all praying for you and Mary Beth every day.
Thank you, son.
All right, my man. Everything else is good, though. Hang in there, my man.
You got it.
Thanks.
Have a great day, guys.
Thanks
for everything.
Bye-bye.
340-1590, 340-1590. Well, other than that, guys, the stars and the moon and everything is lining up. And, Alan, you've got some profound statements here.
Well, I was just going to say, that we haven't talked a lot about money. And I think one of the reasons is when the market just keeps going up, and you're getting gains in a quarter of like 14%, there's not much to talk about. But
14% is a nice quarter.
Oh, yeah. But
that's a nice year, Joe.
It is
a
nice
year. But the problem is when the market comes down 14%, then most people start talking about it. But by that time, it's
Are they
too
talking
late.
or complaining?
Well, the word is complaining. But, here's what Bulldog was saying. Mary Beth has a quote, a variable annuity that does this. You're in the market. You're invested in the market. 2 years ago, she made 20%. Last year, she technically stood even, didn't do anything up or down. But then this first quarter of this year, just ending March 31st, was up dramatically, around 14% in the S&P 500. Well, in her contract, she has two floating parts. One is a guaranteed death benefit that guarantees her beneficiaries the highest quarter, so whatever is the best quarter that comes along, or 5% per year, whichever is better. So if she happens to die when the market's down, the family's protected. Then, if she happens not to die, they say, okay, fine, in case the market collapses, we're going to guarantee you a 5% income on whatever you put in, and you can get that for the rest of your life, And once a year, if the market goes up, you go up. Well, she's already gone up. So her guaranteed for life income and her death benefit are excellent. So she's protected, and her kids are protected. But 90% of the people, Alan, they forget how the insurance portion works in a contract. Now, I'm supposed to say for my compliance people, you're supposed to know the claims paying ability of the company, and Dan and I both run into this constantly, so we try to deal with only the highest rated companies in the business, and Dan especially. But if somebody walks in the door and they've got a bar in a real bad neighborhood, they may not.
They may have to go to surplus lines, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No.
As long as that carrier has the claims paying ability, and many of the big ones like Lloyd's and stuff,
they do.
They're bigger than most companies anyway.
One of the things that we use the word admitted carrier. Admitted means the state, whatever state it might be that you're in, usually has a state guarantee fund that protects the consumer in case something happens to a company.
And all the carriers pay per policy a little fee into that.
Yep. And then what happens is, in history, there have always been thieves that come along. I don't care what it is. But, Dan, I haven't heard of anybody now for many, many, many years. But then every once in a while, even when there is, I guess the best example I go back to is 1992. Which was Hurricane Andrew, who put 10, 12, 13 insurance companies out of business. But the state paid every claim. It was called admitted carriers. The state says, we're there with you, and that was just all it was.
It takes a little more time, but you got to be patient, and it does get done. It's much better to hear that than, well, they're out of business, tough luck.
Yeah. Well, the key was, when you get a major horrific disaster, let's face it, things are not going to happen overnight to get things back to normal. No. So I don't care what you do, it just takes time.
And if you recall, Joe, we've had some awful years where we've had 7 or 8 hurricanes crisscross across the whole state. As the adjusters were coming in to do their job, they were pulled out and said, you got to run away because there's another storm coming.
Hey.
I mean, it was bad. And then, if you recall, we had all that stuff down in Texas and stuff. Adjusters were pulled out of here to go there or vice versa. It's a tough situation.
Well, listen, it's a big country, and there's always going to be disasters. There's always going to be problems. But here again, thank you, Lord, we're in Florida 1 and in America 2, or in America first and in Florida second, whichever way you want to
I look at it America first and Florida second.
Yep. So, hey, listen, it's all good news to me. It's close to the Bahamas, and my boat's floating. I'm a happy camper.
There you go.
340-1590, 340-1590. By the way, if you don't call in, which you're not
going to today,
you can call the radio station anytime, and they'll give you our individual numbers, and we'll help you any way we can, answer questions whenever we can. Again, Greg Fasula, attorney; Dan Warren, independent insurance agent; Joe Martek, financial advisor; Ms. Victoria Lloyd, RE/MAX of Stewart; Mike Paulus, mortgage broker. We're here to answer your questions, help you any way we can. 340-1590. How much time we got, Mother?
How about 15 seconds?
15 seconds.
So I guess see you next week.
See you next week.
See, in 15 seconds or less, yes, or more. Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye, folks.
You've been listening to the Team Martek Hour. The Team Martek Hour is a paid program. The content was provided by the advertiser. WPSL, its staff, management, and ownership were not responsible for its content. Investment involves risk. Prior to making any investment, an investor should meet suitability requirements. Past results are not necessarily indicative of future performance. Neither the opinions expressed nor the information provided constitutes a recommendation to purchase or provide investment advice. The material presented is not a substitute for obtaining professional advice from a qualified person or firm. Securities offered through Centaurus Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. Tune in again next Wednesday at 11:05 for the Team Martek Hour here on WPSL 1590.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.